Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of the Into the Arena podcast through Men for Life. I'm Sean Corcoran, the CEO of Men for Life. Today, I'm here with our co-host, Andrew Wood. Andrew, how are you today?
I'm good. Warm, sitting by the fire, old man in it today.
Yeah, it's about, I don't know, like 20, 30 degrees warmer here than it is there. And I refuse to go outside. All right, so today is a really important conversation to me because as we dive into the Arena podcast, as I build out the Men for Life Arena, a online community for men to focus on things like fatherhood, marriage, biblical masculinity, it's really important to me that I'm clear that the focus of Men for Life and the focus of the work that I'm doing is still pro-life. And so the question then becomes, what is the connection between biblical masculinity, being a good man rooted in Christ, and the pro-life movement, and I think we can go so far, as we were talking before we started recording, as to why are men needed in the pro-life movement, and where's the connection there, and why is that all important? Because as our mission moves forward, the other part of Men for Life is the fatherhood program for the pregnancy centers, which is through the pregnancy centers, is focused on saving babies. But our main focus in Men for Life is to change the culture by reigniting authentic masculinity. And in doing that, that we're going to create more pro-life men. We're going to save lives, in addition to all the other benefits that come to society and to men through the principles of biblical masculinity. And so we're still rooted in the idea of pro-life. Men for Life is a pro-life organization. And this is just our answer. Our answer is bringing men into the conversation and bringing men to build them up and to be better men. And I think the only way, and I think you agree on this, the only way to build good men is through principles of biblical masculinity.
Yeah, we have to focus on that. I mean, I think even when I was leading a pregnancy center, the question I would get often, not just from secular folks or abortion proponents, but even from pro-life folks, what's a dude doing leading a pregnancy center? Like, why are you involved in this? Which I always thought was interesting, because we know that men are very much involved in the making of a child. And so to say that this is a woman's issue, frankly, means that we have taken the line from the enemy, hook, line, and sinker. I mean, we've taken it and been like, well, the narrative from the left, the narrative from the enemy, the serpent, is this is a woman's issue. The narrative from Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, is this is men stay in your lane. This is a woman's issue. And what we've done, even subconsciously in the church pew, is we have agreed. Okay, I guess it is a woman's issue, and I grew up in a family that when I had family members that recorded with those big old shoulder camcorders their babies being born, and we watched them as a family. Like it was so crazy. I would never do that to my kids, but it was just a normal thing. I watched my cousins be born. I grew up on a farm. I watched animals be born. It's just been a process of seeing life enter the picture. And I've known since I was a kid that it does take a male and it takes a female in order for that life to occur. And so I think first off, when we're thinking about biblical masculinity and why it matters when it comes to the life issue is again, and we're going to beat this drum over and over and over when we have these conversations, is the enemy can use a passive man like he did in the garden with Adam, but he can also use an overbearing, abusive man, one that may tell a woman, you must have this abortion, or one that slips an abortion pill in a drink, or whatever it may be. But he can also use that passive man that says, hey, I'll support you in whatever decision you make. And that sounds on the surface, that sounds like a man is being supportive. Well, I just want you to be happy. I want you to do what you feel is right and necessary. And what I tell guys in those moments is, if your girl asks, where do you want to eat supper tonight? And you're like, look, I'll support whatever decision you make. You want Mexican food? We'll eat Mexican food. You want McDonald's? We'll eat McDonald's. But when it comes to the life of a child, when you say, I support whatever decision you make, you're putting the burden of that decision on her shoulders. And that's exactly what Adam did in the garden. The enemy is attacking Eve and saying, did God really say? And Adam is just sitting there.
Yeah.
Hey, I support you in whatever decision you make. If you want to eat that apple, by all means, eat that apple. And you mentioned, offline, the eat that apple and the consequences are yours. I don't have to, they ain't mine.
Your mouth, your choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and we saw what kind of lie from the pit of hell that was.
Right.
Because who did God call to when he entered the garden? Adam, where are you?
Right.
And Adam's like, we're hiding in the bushes. Well, why are you in the bushes? Well, because we're naked. Who told you were naked? And this woman you gave me ate of the tree, but God went after the man because, hey, I put you here to steward all of this. And look what occurred. And so I think we have to give a clear understanding of why, when you're passive like that or when you're overbearing, those things are not the answer. And our goal as dads is to, instead of looking at your girl and saying, or your wife, whoever it may be, and saying, I support you in whatever decision you make. What if you looked at her and said, I know this is tough and this might not have been in the cards, but here's what I am going to do. I'm going to love you and I'm going to love that baby, and I'm here. You're not going to do this alone. We're going to do this together. You do that and it changes everything. I've seen it firsthand. You've seen it firsthand. It literally changes everything. When we would see the dad come to the pregnancy center and be in the room when they're getting an ultrasound, it changed everything. Everything. We would have girls come in adamant, I'm going to have an abortion. I can't do this. When I tell my boyfriend, when I tell my husband, they're going to lose their mind. And then the next time they came, the boyfriend or husband was with them. And you're like, oh, it didn't go like you thought it would, did it? He stood up. He stepped up. He made the effort. And we've seen it the other way, where the girl said, I think I'm going to have this child. She goes home and talks to the man, and she flips because he has influenced her in that direction. And so I think, again, we can't be, as I used to tell folks, we can't devalue life in the womb and then expect to get it right everywhere down the ladder.
Right.
Like it just doesn't work that way. Once you start devaluing life in the womb, don't be surprised when you get a shooting in Australia. Don't be surprised when you get people killing each other, because, well, you have created a frame of reference where some lives have more values than others. Don't be surprised about assisted suicide and euthanasia and all of those things. And in the same way, if a dad gets it wrong in the womb, he's going to get it wrong in a lot of other areas. And so this is an opportunity to step in and be the man and dad that's you've been called to be.
Yeah. And I think, to just kind of draw out what you were just saying, it's more than just the shooting, and you can see it because it happened, a couple months ago with Charlie Kirk. The shooting is one thing. The shooting could have been just a random person, or if you're Candace Owens, it could be an entire government, a conspiracy to kill one man. Regardless, though, that's the shooting, right? The clear devaluing of human life really came across with what happened next. With all of the videos, like, people didn't just sit back and say, oh, I'm glad he's dead, right? They took the time to pull out their cameras, make some production out of them cheering on his death, talk about, how amazing it is and how glorious it is, and they had all these opinions about why it was a great thing that he died. And they shared these publicly. Like, that's their legacy. This is something that is permanent, on these people forever. And that's who they are. And for many of them, they don't care because they don't value life. And I agree with you. The devaluing of life starts with life in the womb, and then to the other thing that you said, which is about, putting the entire burden on mom. I think it's important that we be clear that this isn't just two guys, two dads and husbands standing here talking about this. That is clear data. The Vitae Foundation has done a study a couple of years ago on the messaging to moms. Where did dad come in? And what they found when they interviewed the women what they found was that was the least supportive thing that a man can say, your body, your choice, or to say, whatever you want to do. And for the reason you said, because it puts the entire burden on the woman. And when we go through a relationship, and whether you like it or not, once you create a child, you have a relationship. What that relationship looks like can be 100 different things, but you have a relationship. And if we can say, and in Men for Life, this is how we classify it, masculinity is to protect, to provide, to lead, to serve, and to leave a legacy that honors God. And when you say, hey, whatever you want to do, we're talking about a baby, right? We're not talking about lunch. Like, whatever you want to do, you are neither protecting that child or the woman. You are not providing, a point of stability for her. You are not leading her, and you are not serving anyone. And so I think that it's really important that idea of whatever you want to do is the absence of masculinity, and so that's why it's so important that we connect authentic masculinity or biblical masculinity with the pro-life idea.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that I found when I would go speak or preach or talk about the issue of life, from a biblical worldview, often men would come up afterwards and they'd be fired up. I mean, they're ready. You've seen this too. They're like, I didn't know I had a role to play, which is really, frankly, it's frustrating, because that means I was the first one to give voice that they have heard,
Right.
that they had a role to play. And that angers me at times, because I'm saying, why did it take me to tell you that you had a role to play? Yeah. Like, do you not have a role to play in your home? Do you not have a role to play in your community? Do you not have a role to play, in the lives of those that are coming afterwards? Generations that are coming. And so it's an interesting thing when we, a lot of people just don't want to talk about the abortion issue. That it makes them uncomfortable. They want to rant and rave about a lot of things, but when it comes down to, hey, is that a life in the womb or not? Well, of course it is. That you hear that a lot from Christian folk. Well, if it is, then like we can't say things like, I support whatever you do.
Right.
Or I would have friends that I used to work with that were Christian, or they would claim to be Christian, but we viewed the cultural issues very differently. And they would say things like the same thing, President Biden said for the bulk of his career. Well, personally, I'm pro-life, but I would never put that on someone else. What nonsense.
Right.
I mean, that's just that's such a crock that we are. Hold on, you believe it's a life. You are saying it is a human, but you wouldn't put that decision on anyone else. I mean, what are you talking about? Like that, right. That's not conviction. And it's certainly not a position. I think, again, it's a cop-out. But I also think the reason why we see some of the things we see is some folks, it's never made it to their front porch. And so, and that goes for pro-lifers and those that are abortion proponents. If you haven't really wrestled with this issue and thought about it and thought thoroughly through it, when it knocks on your door, whether it's your personal life, your kids, your grandkids, a neighbor, somebody at the church, you are not going to be prepared with a response. And I think too, I've talked to a number of folks that thought they were being loving and kind and compassionate, and they literally drove someone to an abortion clinic. And I'm going, that is not a formula that is viewing this through the lens of the Bible and through the lens of a biblical worldview on these issues. And so if that is not being formed in the home,
yeah.
And so let's take it back to the home. The father is called to be the leader. If that is not being formed in the home, hey, where does our family stand on the issue of life? Okay, well, we're pro-life. Okay, what does that mean? Why are we pro-life? Like, wrestle with it. Now, appropriately with your children and your family, but really wrestle with these things. Look around. And I remember we used to go to Dollywood over in East Tennessee, And on the sign, it says, if you are pregnant, do not ride this ride. And so I used to pose questions to those around me. Who is that protecting? Now, obviously, it's protecting the theme park. But outside of that, who is that protecting? Is that protecting the mom or the baby? Because we are making a statement right there. If you ride this ride pregnant, something could happen to the child inside of you. You know, if you see somebody pregnant and they're smoking a cigarette, we all, secular believers, it doesn't matter, we all have opinions of that. If you see them drinking.
Right.
And you know, if you go to a pharmacy and you're breastfeeding a child, or you're pregnant, they ask you these questions before they give you these drugs. Why? To protect the mom or to protect the baby? Because we have in society already formalized like, hey, there's some things that could harm that child inside your womb. The same people that would never call it a child have humanized it by saying, but if you take this medicine while you're pregnant, that clump of cells could be injured. Well, injured, how could it be injured? It's not a human, you know? So really wrestle through why these are positions that we take. This isn't something that we just flippantly woke up and went, yeah, I think I'm pro-life.
Right.
You know, it has to be rooted in something.
Yeah, and you know, and I like the comparison you're bringing to the pharmaceuticals. That's the easy one. So, because someone who cares, right? Someone who answers those questions with the intention of having a child, is going to be honest, and then is going to avoid taking drugs which will injure that child, right? But if that same person went to the abortion clinic, you know, pro-choicers would have no issue with that. And so what that really draws us to, the only conclusion that makes sense there is that they are suggesting that the value of the life in the womb is completely dependent upon whether or not the mother wants the child. So that same child in the womb could either be a clump of cells, a fetus, or be a baby. And that determination is solely made on whether mom chooses.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no objective truth, I guess is what I'm getting at. It's just the subjective idea of whatever mom thinks. And the problem with that is that there is objective truth. You know, that there is objective truth in life and in everything that we do. And that's kind of, you know, where our society today has gotten off the rails, is this idea that there's no objective truth. But there is, and you can't be logically consistent if you can believe that the same baby in the womb is either a clump of cells, if mom wants to abort that baby, or is a baby if we're warning her not to take pharmaceutical drugs, which could harm that baby, right? And so I think that you know, part of being a pro-life man is standing for objective truth. You know, that we are saying, hey, this is what's true, that this is a baby. Life begins at conception. You know, science has already settled on that. You know, I think it was 96% of biologists, over 5,000 biologists, over 1,000 institutions, 96% of them agreed that human life begins at conception. So that's not really a question anymore. You know, the question is the value of that human life. And if we don't have any objective standard by which to value human life, then we don't have any objective standard to value any human life, which brings us back to the argument you made in the beginning, which is that if we devalue human life in the womb, then we can devalue human life at any stage. And so I think that's why it's important that we recognize that this is not a women's issue. This is a human issue, you know, and the attack on abortion is an attack on the image of God. So it's a spiritual issue, and men are called both to stand up for human rights and to fight in the spiritual war. And so that's why men are needed, and that's why it is an inherent part of masculinity to protect life, especially the most vulnerable, and to stand up and say, hey, you know what, like we're not okay with this. And what sucks is that you had, you know, 53 years since Roe versus Wade, and probably even going back before that, but 53 years since Roe versus Wade, where you've got that one side, like you said earlier, saying, sit down, shut up, don't talk about this. This has nothing to do with you. This is a women's issue. And then you've got the pro-life movement at that time, up until very recently, saying, just being so focused, hyper-focused on mom and baby, that that they just overlooked the men. And so there's only one voice to the men, and that voice is the voice of opposition. And so that's where we get the men in the churches and the churches as a whole, sitting back and saying, okay, well, this must be a women's issue because nobody's telling us otherwise. And I would suggest that it was never up to the women in the pro-life movement to call men to action. It's up to men to say, hey, this isn't right. We should do something about this. And I have the same experience that you have. Every time I speak, I have men come up and they're like, what can I do? And that's the whole basis of developing the Men for Life arena, is to give them something to do. Like, where can I point you? You can go to the pregnancy centers and you can help. We're developing this fatherhood program that needs mentors, and with 3,000 pregnancy centers, if they all had a fatherhood program, they'd need, 30,000 mentors just to get guess, right? So there's a lot that you can do. However, what can I give you directly? And so that's kind of where the Men for Life arena came from. So this is all based on pro-life, but I believe that the answer to abortion is for men to reclaim biblical masculinity.
Well, and it permeates everything. And again, we cannot be a brotherhood, a group of men that are like flippant when it comes to the life of the most vulnerable. And there's no one more vulnerable than the child in the womb. And so when we're flippant toward that, we are setting a standard. When we look a woman in the eye that we have made a baby with, and we say, this is on you, it is just furthering the divide and the division that we've seen in our culture. It's furthering the lie from Satan. And so instead, we should be stepping up boldly and saying 100%, we're going to do all we can for life. Look, and I think I've had conversations even with folks. They're like, look, we're in no kind of relationship to be together, but now we have this baby. I'm like, that doesn't mean you have to, have all your relationship stuff figured out. But the reality is a human's coming into the picture. So,
right.
So what does that mean? How will you co-parent? How are you going to make the effort to be involved and be present and be engaged in the process? One thing that the abortion folks would like to do often is they'll say things like, they think they're getting us in a gotcha moment, like, oh, we should pass a law that men should start supporting financially while the woman is pregnant. And we're like, okay, like, yes, let's do that. That would be great. Why not? Because what they are trying to call our bluff, and what we're saying is, no, we want to have a seat at the table. Yeah. We need to, not just we want to, we need to have a seat at the table, because part of us is in that child, and it matters, and it makes a difference. And so when we shirk those responsibilities, I even think back in the day, men wouldn't even go in the delivery room. They would just go smoke a cigarette out in the, hey, let me know when baby gets here, which is just bonkers to me. But that was that's just what you did. No one involved the dad in that process. And so whether it was the church or the culture, the reality is we have to right this ship. And this gives us a chance to right the ship and say, no, men, you do have a say in the matter. I'm not saying go pick out all the colors for the nursery. I'm not saying all that. I'm saying there's a human coming into the picture. You are its father. Be the father of this child, and be intentional. And whether it be finances or whatever that looks like, you have to make way for this child. And we've talked on past episodes about the man bringing peace into the home. Think about a situation, you've seen it, I've seen it, where folks are walking inside the pregnancy center and there's no peace because they didn't want to be pregnant. Now they're scared out of their mind. Think about what would change if the man in that moment would say, hey, I got this. It's okay.
Right.
Yes, we're overwhelmed. No, this wasn't part of the plan, but we're going to be parents. How awesome is that? We got this.
Yeah.
Think about the sigh of relief that would come, just the deep breath that would happen. And because I've seen it in my own marriage when there's certain things that are anxiety inducing, when I say to the family, hey, it's okay. We got this.
Yeah.
And I you can just see the anxiety float away because they're like, okay, I guess we got this.
Yeah.
And it makes all the difference in the world. And so I think when we come at this, we're saying that that life is precious, not because we've said so, not because science has said so, but because God is the creator of life. And so if that requires, if I'm going to say I'm a Christian, that requires something of me. If God has said, I ordain and create life,
right,
then that is my marching order. Then if our God ordains and creates life and humans bear the image of God, then I can't be okay when society enshrines laws that will end the life of humans inside the womb that don't have an opportunity at that life. I can't sit back because the Bible says I can't sit back. My God says I can't sit back. And we for so long have said, well, we'll let the culture deal with the culture stuff. We'll let the church deal with the church stuff. Well, when the culture starts getting and dabbling in the church stuff and the theological stuff, I heard a pastor say just yesterday that somebody was talking about the separation of church and state, and he says we can have that conversation, but no one said there should be a separation of morality in the state. And what we have done is we've enshrined sin into the code. And then we're expected as believers to just live under that. And I don't see that in Scripture. Daniel didn't live under that in Scripture. Paul didn't live under that in Scripture without, saying things and fighting within the system that was there. And certainly we shouldn't be doing that here either.
Yeah. And then something that I thought of the other day is, I guess I said it the other day, and then I saw it when I said it was, when Jesus stopped the Pharisees from stoning the prostitute, right? Like the Pharisees were the law, they were the law of that community in that time. And so even Jesus, and there's other examples that I've heard and that I'm aware of Jesus getting political, but I mean, Jesus stood up to the law for what he perceived as an injustice against humanity. And he did it with truth, right? That's all he needed was the truth. And so I think that that standing up against the law when the law is unjust is biblical. It's a necessary thing, and it's a part of masculinity. To lead. Who's going to do it if we are not? And and we can look at the 53 years when men have sat on the sidelines, and we can say, hey, or we can at least acknowledge the truth that, hey, like this hasn't gone very well. Abortion numbers have skyrocketed. Just like we talk about absent fathers, just like men's absence or men's passivity has affected so many things in our society. The fatherlessness epidemic, and we can have an entire podcast on that one day with all the statistics, because I have had people question, what are you talking about, fatherlessness epidemic? And and those people are just looking for a fight, because anybody with a rational mind can look at what's going on and can read the data and say, wow, dads are actually important. And so just like absent fathers, men being absent from this issue has not been working. And so I think that it's time for men to take a stand, and and it's not just you and I having this conversation, right? There's the Men's March in Boston. There's a movement, and so it's just that we're having this conversation at this time because for whatever reason, like this is the time that we've been given, that it's important, and that men are starting to see the importance of stepping forward.
Well, and I think too the generation that you talk about over the last 50 years, there's a lot of folks that are starting to look around and going, hey, I should have a brother, but I don't. I should have a sister, but I don't. There's people that should be in my graduating class that aren't. There's grandkids that aren't here. There, and the list goes on and on, because we have now seen, this is all we've ever known. that abortion is reigning, millions of abortions every year, hundreds of millions worldwide. And so now we're starting to, because of technology and things that we have access to, data, we're starting to go, hold on, something isn't sitting with me. I think that's why a younger generation is starting to say, hey, with all the technology we have, and you're trying to tell me that's not a life in the womb? With everything that we have, you're telling me, I've watched my siblings on our refrigerator grow because we have images, literal selfies at this point of babies in the womb. And you're going to tell me that's not a child.
Right.
And so that line of thinking, I think the abortion industry has seen, okay, that's been, we can't simply say it's not life anymore. So they're even starting to shift of, okay, well, it is life, but you still have your right. And then you found the interesting thing about it all is because of all the gender confusion, argument in the culture nowadays, even Planned Parenthood is like, well, I mean, this is a man's issue as well because men can get pregnant. And it's like, now, so we've reached a level of just nonsense. And I think there's a segment of folks that are starting to go, yeah, like y'all might have had me, when we didn't have access to some data and technology, but now you're telling me a dude can get pregnant. Like I'm out. You've lost me. And so I think that's why we're seeing this wave of change, but also it's why the abortion pill is so prevalent, because now the abortion industry, who's making millions, billions of dollars off of abortion, is saying, well, if we can just ship you the pills, we never have to even show you an ultrasound. We don't have to do anything. We can just say you had a miscarriage. We can say a number of things because now you're not having to even be seen by anybody. And that's why the abortion pill has become the quick fix. And that's why most abortions now are via the abortion pill. And folks are doing that in their homes, in their college dorms, in their communities. And now families are being involved. Now roommates are being involved. Now, janitors, custodians of some of these places are being involved because they're seeing the ramifications and the aftermath. And then society's having to wrestle with, well, what do we do now? Because now not only is there an ultrasound image that shows there's life, now after this abortion occurred, they're actually holding a life in their hand.
Yeah.
And now we can't just sweep this under the rug. And so that's an opportunity for men to step up in those areas, from the church, from government institutions, school institutions, whatever it may be, and say, hold on, no, this isn't okay. This isn't okay. Y'all claim to care about women. Y'all claim to care about the health and welfare of people out there. And you're having them do medical procedures in their home with no oversight.
Right.
And that is not okay. And like we need people stepping up and saying that. We need people stepping up and saying we don't need to be the flushing the remains of humans, because people are having abortions at their house. Like this is not. It is certainly a church fight, but it's not just a church fight. It is an opportunity for us to step in as men, as godly men, and say, the buck stops here. We're not okay with this. This is not celebrating women. This is not celebrating life. This is not celebrating the good things of our community. It's not setting up folks for success. And actually stand in the gap for some of these folks that don't feel like they have a voice. And I think it's time that men find their voice and speak on these issues. Now, I would caution you, wrestle and think through these issues. I've been around folks that are, they think they're ready, and then they get pressed, and they're not. They're not, and they can get twisted into a pretzel really quick with one argument or another. And I've, when I stepped into the role at the center, and this was what I was going to spend the rest of my life doing. I've watched things that I watched mainly just so I could have a conversation around why I'm against what I'm against and why I'm for what I'm for. And And the sad thing is there are partial birth abortion videos out there. There are things that ways that we can see what is actually happening to our neighbors. You want to talk about loving your neighbor. Loving your neighbor is not taking them to a butcher shop down the street at the abortion clinic. That is not loving your neighbor, the one in the womb or the one carrying that child.
Yeah, and and now we have the I know that at least 2 opened recently. I think one in New Jersey and one in DC that will do abortions up to 34 weeks, and like there's no reason, like just deliver the baby. Like at that point, there's no question that this is a baby that could survive outside of the womb. The question just becomes, I don't want it, but like 2 weeks later, baby's born. Like you don't get to say I don't want it. Right. Like it's the same baby. And so there's a lot going on here, and they're just pushing and pushing and pushing farther and farther and farther. And yes, I agree with you that the farther they push, the easier it's going to be for rational people to say, wait a minute, this is insane. And I don't support insanity, even if I supported this argument before. They're going to keep going until somebody stops them. And if we sit back and we're passive, then there's nobody stopping them. And so they're just going to keep pushing. And then the other thing you brought up, you're not serving the baby or, the person carrying that baby, the mom, and I think that's a really important thing, because when we talk about men as protectors, it's there are multiple studies at this point that related to mental health of women and abortion, like post-abortive women. Mental health, and 2 in particular. One is from January of this year, 2025. The other is older. I think it's maybe 2014. And just going between the 2, women who have had an abortion are between 2 and 6 times more likely to commit suicide. And that's an important thing to point out, that I'm not talking about attempt suicide, because we already know that women attempt suicide at greater numbers than men. Men commit suicide because they're successful. So I'm talking about successful attempts at suicide, 2 to 6 times more likely post-abortive women. And so, this affects the mental health of women. And so if we know that, and we're not doing anything to stand in the way of that, then we are failing in our masculinity. And I've had people say, well, yeah, but, and this is the craziest argument, and it's happened multiple times, and people always go back and delete their comments. Fortunately, I screenshot everything. But but they say, hey, yeah, but women don't have abortions unless they're already broken, and they don't always use those words, but that's what they're saying. To which my response, of course, is, so you're saying that we know that people who are going into this place are coming at a point of brokenness, and that following through with this will lead to more brokenness or death. And we're not trying to stop that. And that's when they go delete the comment and they backtrack, because they can't say that, because if they say that, then they're wrong about everything.
Well, and many of those same folks will make the argument, they'll say it in not so many words, of, well, we don't need more of those babies. Yeah. And it's like, and I'm going, hold on, listen to what you're saying. I mean, this is the mindset, even within our kind of pro-life movement, where we say life is valuable, period. End of story. Like every life that God has created has value, and should be protected and fought for. And I used to even think there was a time where I would, when I worked in politics, and you think about who your constituents are, and I would challenge every elected official, when you are speaking to and about your constituents, it includes those in the womb, and if, just like future any kid, anybody that could be a future vote, like that is your constituent. So what are you doing to create environments within your district to see families flourish, to see lives flourish? And that's why when we talk about the devaluing the life in the womb, and then the devaluing the life at the end of life via doctor-assisted suicide, terminal illness deaths, then you devalued it across the board. And we've seen it even in the marriage argument. What happened when we changed the definition of marriage? It devalued everything about relationship.
Right.
That's what it did. Matter of fact, it went even further. It devalued everything about gender and identity and male and female. It devalued sports in terms of female sports and male sports. And all it took was one decision to change the definition of something that had been rooted in our society, that was rooted in a biblical framework, which was marriage. And the state got involved in it. And then they changed the definition of it, and all heck breaks loose. Why? Because you change a definition and you change a culture, and everybody starts to see it as this. You know, it's the same reason why when they're writing articles about heartbeats, they started using cardiac activity. Why? Because when you're reading an article that says heartbeat, I think real life human. When I read an article and it says cardiac activity, I think, wow, that could be anything, or cardiac pulses or electrical pulses, because they know what they're doing. I have read these articles for decades, and the same journalist says heartbeat. And then it was like the marching orders went out. Yeah. And the next week, all these major publications are saying cardiac activity or something else. And so these are the things we have to, even if we're not careful and if we're not discerning, we will take that hook, line, and sinker as well. And we'll start changing our language. And we'll start, it's the same argument with pronouns. We'll start doing all the things the world is doing, and we'll say that it's being loving, but in reality, the enemy's going, I got you. See, I quietly shifted things, and now you're speaking our language instead of us speaking your language. And I just think that's a dangerous place, and it's an opportunity for men to step in and go, no, you're not going to redefine these things. You're not going to redefine life. I am the dad to this child, and I'm going to be involved. We're going to take care of it. We're, no girlfriend, no wife of mine is going to feel like she's not supported. First off, we got to stop treating sex like it's at a carousel at a carnival, and it could be thrown out with whoever. But second, when a life is now involved, it's an opportunity for a man to step in and be the man he's been called to be. And I have seen it over and over and over and over, where dudes have done that in some very difficult situations. But on the other side, they wouldn't have changed anything. Why? Because now they're holding their little girl. Now they're holding their little boy. Right. And they're like, yeah, it was tough. It was hard, but I do it all over again because of the life that's in front of me. And so here's the thing. Community appreciates that. Even a secular culture appreciates that. What happened the other day in Australia? One of the videos is like a fruit stand owner charges after the terrorist and disarms him. Why is even the guy filming cheering? Why is the secular world even saying, hey, hats off, giving him applause? Why? Because everyone wanted a man to step in and do something in that moment. Right. And no one did until he showed up. Yeah. And he wasn't trained. I don't know if he'd been to a gym anytime recently. Didn't look like it. But he looked in that moment and said, I can't sit. I have to get involved in this one way or the other. And he did. He really was willing to risk everything. And often when I go out and kind of articulate these things, one thing that I talk about is our founders. Our founders said, we're willing to risk everything for future generations. The men that stood in our founding fathers, who were mostly in their 30s or late 20s, they were young dudes. It's interesting. All the pictures make them look a lot older, but they were young dudes. And they said, we're willing to risk everything. Why? For the future of our generations, for our kids, grandkids, and even people we don't know. We're going to risk it all. Our fortunes, our honor, we're risking it all. And we have taken that and flipped it on its head. And now we're saying, with abortion, we're saying we are willing to risk future generations. No, we're willing to sacrifice future generations for ourselves. Where the founding fathers said, we will sacrifice ourselves for future generations. We now say, we'll sacrifice future generations for ourselves. And
Right.
that's what the abortion agenda is: sacrificing future generations so that we can have present comfort. And the reality is that's even a lie from the pit of hell, because they're not comfortable. Those
No.
folks are not comfortable. They're not at a good spot. And anyone that says they are, you can see it in their eyes. They're not telling you the truth.
You can see it in their eyes. You can hear it in their tone. You can even in the words that they use, when they're commenting in text, right, on
Yep.
social media posts. It comes with hate. It comes with vitriol. It doesn't come with, I can stand on reason and logic and make my argument, because you can't stand on reason and logic and truth if you support abortion. Like, you have to deny the human life. You have to deny humanity in order to support your position. I have a friend who I went to law school with who is on the other side of the political spectrum from me, and we always have civil conversations. We disagree,
Sure.
but we don't do it in a disrespectful way. And and sometimes, sometimes he says something that makes sense to me, but and I hope sometimes I say things that make sense to him. But he posted something the other day, and it was an image that went with an article, and it said, mom forced to carry her baby to term even though she knew he would die. And then, the subtext of the article, or subheading of the article, was about how pro-life laws are destroying women. And what my suggestion to him was that what we're saying is that that it would have been better for her to kill the baby instead of for the baby to die, right? And the issue with that is that we all die. And so where do we draw that line? Like, all of us will die at some point. There are thousands and thousands of stories, especially of people who have then become pro-life, who were told by doctors, your baby is going to have, this issue, or they're not going to live. And they did, and they're healthy, and they're thriving. And so sometimes doctors get it wrong,
Yeah.
right? And so to suggest that because someone might die, we should kill them to avoid that suffering is ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous. And of course, or not of course. So I made that comment on his post, and he said, well, that's an absurd thing to say. And I was like, yes, it has to be. It has to be an absurd thing to say when you start realizing what it is that you're suggesting. When you're suggesting that that we should kill people in order to avoid them dying, like, that's absurd. You can't not be absurd with reason and logic, to take that anywhere else, because that's what we're saying. And so, but I think that is the context with which many pro-life, pro-choice people, that is the context with which many pro-choice people approach this, is how is this negatively affecting mom?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of looking at the totality of the situation, right? Like, in the totality of the situation is there's a mom, there's a baby. Neither of them should die.
Right.
And so how do we protect both of their lives? And I think that that's part of being a man, is figuring out how do we protect both of their lives and standing up for both of their lives. And you brought up something really important earlier that I don't want to close out without addressing. And that is, what you suggested was a gotcha moment many times when pro-choice people say, well, if you're pro-life, then you should have laws that that require dad to provide financial support, from the moment of conception. And people have said that to me too, and I always say yes, yes, I do. Or they say, you should make. Why don't you support laws that that make it easier for a mom to afford having kids? I do. I support those laws. I don't think there's anyone in the pro-life movement who doesn't support those laws. Why do you support everybody not getting their SNAP benefits? I don't support people not getting their SNAP benefits. The government did what the government did, and that was that was a bipartisan cluster.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I
Well,
don't, both parties blaming each other, neither of them doing anything, and people suffered. And so,
yeah, we have to get to a place where we're, and I think, if there's anybody listening to this, watching this, and who's involved in the political arena, the conservative pro-life movement should be the pro-family movement.
yes,
And so we should 100% unapologetically incentivize having a family.
yes,
We should 100% unapologetically create environments in our communities that allow families to flourish. Whether that's playgrounds or, being walkable or tax incentives. I mean, in the state of Florida, they said if you're buying diapers first 2 years of your life, you're not going to pay any sales tax on it. That's such a no-brainer.
yeah,
That if folks are saying the truth, then everyone will get behind that. And so for me, that's my call to a lot of this is we need to be the pro-family side of things. And it's hard for those on the left to be pro-family when they can't define a family. If you can no longer define what constitutes a family, then you can't, you've lost it. You can't, it's just like when they say they're pro-woman. I'm like, when you can no longer define what that is, you no longer are pro that thing. And so you can't define what a woman is, you're not pro-woman. You can't define what a man is, you're not pro-man, which they never claim to be pro-man. But if you can't do these things and provide clear definitions around them, then you're taking people down a path of chaos and destruction, which, newsflash, that's exactly what the serpent wants to do. Right. John 10:10, he comes to kill, steal, and destroy. That is what he's doing, taking us down a path of destruction. And so Jesus comes that we may have life and have it to the full. We have an opportunity in that moment as godly men in our homes and in our communities to say, I'll tell you what's not going to happen here. And what's not going to happen here is abortion reigning and future generations being sacrificed for us today. That's not going to happen here. And so for some of the guys out there, they're like, well, I don't have that platform, or I don't get a chance to speak or get a chance to do that. Then do it in your house. Do it right there in your context and say, not happening here.
Yeah.
If we would just do that and get our houses in order and get our communities in order when it comes to those things, it will, courage is contagious. It will take flight. I can assure you. And there's an opportunity there to say, well, I don't want to step on toes, or no, we should say boldly and unapologetically, abortion ends a life. It harms women. It harms men. The ramifications are long lasting. It's certainly long lasting for the child that just had its life ended, but it's long lasting for the woman, and it's long lasting for the men that are having to deal with the ramifications for that forever. And me and you have seen what that does to people apart when they don't have God, when they don't have hope, when they don't have those things. And that should be our call as men in our communities, in the church of hey, the folks around us are going to know where we stand, certainly where we stand on the issue of abortion, but they're also going to know that if they find themselves in a tough spot, one of the first phone calls they can make is to me, and I'll be there. Yeah. Like, are we setting that standard and letting them know that you will not do this alone? And for the ladies out there that are like, well, that's all well and good, but my dude bounced as soon as I told him I was pregnant. There are men in your community. There are men at the church, I can assure you, that will step up and help.
Yeah.
I promise. I
promise and those guys are kind of the point, or at least a part of the point of this conversation, which is that is a failure of masculinity. Like that is, you brought up, and it's a great example, that just by saying, we're going to be okay, and the big thing is you don't have to know how. Right. Like you don't have to know how you're going to be okay. It's not about that. It is a matter of confidence in yourself and in God that you're going to be okay, and sometimes when as men, it's our burden when we don't know how things are going to work and we don't know, how's it going to be okay, to just make sure that everyone else is comfortable knowing that we are going to figure it out, because that's what it means to be a man, right? Is to figure out, like, how's it going to be okay. And we don't have to do that on our own. Like, we can rely on God, we can rely on community, but in that moment when everything seems like it's going to crumble, and like you said, there's a lot of anxiety and stress and chaos, to just bring the tensions down, and to let everybody know, hey, like, it's going to be okay. We've got this. And then go figure it out. I'm in a men's group. And one of the big themes of this group is fire, aim, ready. Right? Like, instead of ready, aim, fire,
right?
It's fire, aim, ready. Like, just go and then figure it out as you go. And a lot of times that's what we have to do, because the opposite of that is paralysis, right? Perfection paralysis, or whatever you call it, just planning and planning and planning and planning and not doing. And so, while we might not know, hey, how is this going to be okay? Like it's going to be okay. And, and to call other men to action while they're, if somebody's still listening at this point, an hour in on this, like, I got to say, this is where men in our generation and older, really can take part in the pro-life movement, because so many of these young men didn't have somebody to explain to them, hey, it's going to be okay. Like, we're going to figure this out. And so they have no frame of reference from which to draw that. And there's just this huge opportunity, especially through the pregnancy centers right now, in every community, thousands and thousands of pregnancy centers, to mentor these young men who are coming into the center, because they need that, not just somebody to say, hey, I have kids and I know this is hard and it's going to be okay, but somebody to say, hey, I'm a man and I know this is hard and it's going to be okay, and I can help to show you how.
Well, and two, sharing your number with folks. And if you're listening to this and you don't have community, I had somebody reach out last night, and they were like, I normally don't send messages like this, but I've just felt convicted. I need community with other men that'll hold me to account, that will help me to be better. If you find yourself there, because here's the thing, I can confidently say, and I know you can, Sean, I can confidently look at my family and say it's going to be okay, even though I may not know exactly how I'm going to get there, because of the network of men that I have access to.
Right.
And so when I say it's going to be okay, if I hit a place where I'm like, but in my mind, I'm like, I have no idea, I can make a few phone calls of folks that can speak into me and help me get to that place. And man, does that make a difference? Because here's the thing, if you say it's going to be okay and you have no one to tap into, no one to reach out to, no one to vent, no one to have that conversation with, it is going to be hard. But even in that moment, I think you've been built to, as a man, I think God has built us to say, I got this. It's not, just think what would have happened in the garden if Adam kicked that serpent right in the face and been like, no, we're good. We ain't hungry. Yeah. Mind your business. We got access to all this food.
Yeah.
Go on somewhere. What would have happened? Right. And I think so many times, I saw a video the other day, a woman gets attacked and mugged and her boyfriend runs away. Like, he runs away. And after it's all done, he comes back. And I'm like, dude, if that was my daughter, you would have been in a fight. I can assure you. It might not have been with those guys, but you'd have been in a fight when we got home. Like, those are opportunities where we were built and wired to step in and protect. And the reason why wolves prowl and go after the vulnerable, oftentimes is because they don't think there's a lion ready to take them out.
Right.
And because most of them are cowards. And all it takes is a man to stand up and go, no, not happening here. And I've seen it. And I just think we have to, as men, step into this, pun intended, the arena, and say, yeah, abortion is terrible for humans. It's terrible for men. It's terrible for women. It's against what God has planned for us. and we're not going to stand for it. And I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to run from that. I'm not going to tiptoe around that. And I'm here. I just need y'all to know I'm here if you need me. And then we have to be ready to answer the call when somebody calls needing that assistance.
That's right. Well, man, I really appreciate this. I think that, this was just on my heart to make sure that we talked about in the beginning of this project, the Into the Arena podcast project, that, this isn't a divergence from the pro-life mission of Men for Life. This is a part of it. The biblical masculinity is important to me, and I know it's important to you because of the ability that it has to change so many things, but to save lives of unborn, to protect our communities, and then to really reshape the culture, back to what it was created by God to be. And so, part of that is being pro-life, and part of that is protecting the vulnerable, and part of that is, protecting the women who are going into this, and just as a closing thought, when we talk about protecting the women, I think that it's really important to point out that the abortion clinics separate, just like Satan, right? The abortion clinics separate the father from the mother. Sometimes they ask them to go outside. They won't let mom have a cell phone in the room, because if dad starts texting her, "Hey, I changed my mind," then that might save the life, right? It might eat away at their profits. But the reason they separated is because of the power that we as men, just our presence, not a domineering power, but a power of presence, has in that choice. It's there's multiple studies that show that the dad is the number one influence in mom's decision to choose life or to choose abortion. And so if we grab hold of that knowledge, and we just kind of move forward with that and build a culture of life, it just takes builders, right, to build a culture of life. And so that's why men are needed. And that's always going to be, if a man's looking at when the information for the Men for Life Arena comes out, and they're looking at it and saying, "Hey, this is a men's group, I'm super excited about it," and they're not pro-life and have no inclination to be there, it's probably not the right group. Right. Because this is what's important to our mission, and this is what's important to our culture, and and it takes men being a part of it.
Yeah, and I think too there is a reason why the abortion industry says this is a decision between a woman and her doctor. You never hear them say it's a decision between the mother of the child and the father of the child. Yeah, because they know that's a losing strategy for them. And now they don't even say doctor, they say medical professional, which can be literally anybody. But they also know they have the same data we have, that the most influential person in the decision-making process, when the woman is asked and when the man is asked, right, both agree it is the man. The man's influence is the most influential voice in the decision-making process. And that's why we have to get men to stop saying, "I support whatever decision you make." The woman is telling us the most influential decision maker in this process is him. So she doesn't need you to say, "Hey, you got this. I'll sit this one out." That is not what we've been called to do.
That's right. You got to say, "I got this." And I'm going to bring you along with me, and you're going to be safe, and you're going to be protected, and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I really appreciate you, and I look forward to doing this again next week. And you can catch us on the Men for Life YouTube channel. Go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and share with all your friends. All right. See you later, Andrew.